As the mayor of the town of Clayton, I call this regular town council meeting to order. I ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we pause to give you thanks for the blessings of this day, Lord, and we ask that you be with us for all that we are entering into in the coming days. We ask, Lord, now that you be with us as we proceed with the business for the town of Clayton. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
We have a few adjustments we'd like to make. In an effort to expedite some of the items, we're suggesting to remove items 6A, 6C, and 7D, which is a firefighter's report, but they're all mostly informational, and we can handle that through other channels to give that information to you. And then we would add, I don't have a number for it, but before old business, report from the town's, Stacy is going to give a report on the town's response to the coronavirus. I should also add, we do need to go into closed session tonight for attorney-client privileges and to discuss matter personnel.
All right, I got that noted. Up first is your consent agenda.
We approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Up next, under public hearing, is the amendment to the comprehensive list of fees and charges, after-hour inspection fees.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Rich Capola, Public Services Director. The item you have before you is a policy and modification to the comprehensive list and fees to allow for building inspections during after-hours work, after hours being defined as before 8:30 a.m. or after 4 o'clock p.m., as well as weekends. We've had a few of these larger industrial projects that, for different reasons, have required inspections outside of our normal business hours, and they've requested that we consider for a fee to be allowed to, with advance notice, request those inspections. That way they can do continuous 6 or 7 day work weeks. Looking at some policies from other jurisdictions, typically larger jurisdictions that have a lot more volume of the non-residential kind of industrial, commercial, larger projects are the ones that had these types of policies. We did find a few local ones to craft the policy in front of you. The range of costs per hour that we saw were anywhere from about $125 an hour to $240 per hour, most with a minimum of 3 hours. Therefore, if you're going to have an inspector that is planning on coming in on a Saturday, the minimum would be 3 hours of work paid for to include for their travel time, as well as just the inconvenience of them having to work on the weekend. This policy, again, is just based on the 4 trades of the building inspections, of the inspections department's purview: building, plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. It does not involve any of the horizontal kind of engineering inspections or other departmental or fire department at this time. The recommended rate is $200 an hour with minimum of 3 hours and 72 hours notice prior to the requested inspection to give us time to, 1, see if we have an inspector available at the certification levels required, and 2, be able to pre-plan for that, or for them to be able to pre-plan for that and be able to schedule the work as well as accommodate it from themselves. I believe this is a public hearing because this is a modification to the comprehensive list and fees. So if you don't have any, I guess I'll open it to you for questions.
Questions for Rich? Mr. Grannis.
Rich, how come you haven't included residential?
So as of right now, based on our staffing levels, we don't feel like we can service the volume of potential requests. This is kind of, I would say, a pilot program for us to see what the interest is, how it works, how we are able to actually service it. Again, nights and weekends are a little challenging in general. If it is something that we could expand to other types of construction in the future, we would consider it. Again, I think the rates are a deterrent in many ways. We did see many policies that were kind of split. Some were non-residential only, some did have residential. Again, based on our service levels that we feel like we can provide at this time and the request in front of us, or request that was made of us, we feel like we can service the community that's been requesting it.
Your experience, do you think it would actually be a bad thing if we were to include residential, but then if someone requests it and we cannot provide it, acknowledge to them that at that time we just don't have the capability because of personnel being already committed to other endeavors?
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, from a workload management, as well as having inspectors capable or available to be able to handle that workload, our intent on this was to keep it to the non-residential where we know it's much more planned out in terms of the project schedules. The need is, a lot of the times that we've had this request in the past was somebody that needed to do an inspection overnight because they had a big pour, like a football-sized field, concrete pour that really needed to be inspected, and once they start, they can't stop. So we've had to do an inspection at 5, 6 in the morning to make sure that they can go ahead and get it done in the day. The residential inspections don't typically pop up or have that large of a demand, and so for right now, we were trying to limit it to just non-residential.
What's our standard rate today? Our standard rate for inspection?
On the type of construction and how many different trades are involved, as well as the cost of construction. So the non-residential requirements do not have the comprehensive list and fees right in front of me, but it's based on the size of your construction. All 4 trades are included in your base price of that permit. That fee is still required. This would be, I think it's referred to as a premier service. So this would be on top of the normal fees that they pay just for everyday inspections that are included based on, again, type of construction and size or cost of construction, excuse me. So it varies just depending upon what you're building for non-residential.
That's all I've got.
Mr. Bunn?
I'm going to just piggyback off that just a little bit. I'm going to talk about benchmarking. Can you elaborate on a little benchmarking on this?
Right. So a lot of the larger municipalities that we looked at, the Raleighs, the Charlottes, they have these types of policies. Their rates were, again, anywhere in the kind of $125 an hour with a minimum of 3 hours. Upwards of a Holly Springs, for instance, was another one that was more local that we found. Theirs, I believe, was upwards of $240 an hour with the minimum hours. The $200 an hour for us felt like, from what our cost of the inspectors for these type of inspections, again, the non-residential are more senior inspectors, the level 3s across the board. The $200 an hour is more commensurate upon what we would end up having to pay them for time and a half, as well as the other costs associated with them coming in on a weekend.
Thanks, Rich. That's it.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, if not, this has been noted as a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak, please step forward and state your name for the record. No one wishing to speak, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for their decision. Mr. Grannis.
Before we move forward, I just wanted to express my disappointment that we're not considering residential at this time. I understand what you were suggesting, but for me, I don't really see a huge issue to include it. The other thing that disappoints me is that you can't tell me what our standard rate is. And that would help me to be able to make a definitive decision on what we're looking at.
Anyone else? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the adoption of the after-hours inspection fee policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the after-hours inspection fee policy. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Rich. Up next, under public hearing, is the 2019-243 OA Code of Ordinance Amendment, Chapter 400, access.
Let's get a second motion, please, to adopt.
I thought that's what we did.
We adopted this inspection policy, but I need an adoption of the ordinance as well.
I see. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the ordinance number 2020-0303.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions from council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Willen-Weber.
Good evening. Samantha Willen-Weber, Planning Director. This is the ordinance amendment for the general development standards of our Code of Ordinances. It is Chapter 400, or Section 400, excuse me, of Chapter 155. It is dealing with various different things related to residential and non-residential development. This is the same ordinance amendment that came before council in January and then was further discussed at the council retreat. This is the proposed access, and this is dealing with access to new residential subdivisions, greater than 30 lots, existing, 2 access points, 1 may be stubbed, and then proposed is 2 access points fully constructed. And then the next threshold would be at greater than 300 lots, you would have to have 3 fully constructed access points. At this time, the current ordinance requires 3, but at 250 lots, but one of those may not be immediately constructed. The town council does currently have the ability to waive that. But the ordinance as proposed and as in your packets is for 3 access points fully constructed at 300 lots. And then for multifamily developments, greater than 100 lots or 100 units would be 2 access points fully constructed. And so this is just a table to try and visualize it a little bit better. Again, the ordinance that came before you in January had 250 lots. We have up that threshold to 300 lots, and that is in very similar to Wake Forest, Garner, and Apex, who require that 3rd access point at 300 lots. And then greater than 30 lots, 2 access points. And we also, as you will see, we did continue to leave out the waiver, and that if they would like variance from the language in the ordinance, that you would have to apply for a variance through the Board of Adjustments, Planning Board. And there is also a section here dealing with sidewalks. There was clarification provided for construction versus fee in lieu, when sidewalks would be constructed, and then when fee in lieu could be accepted for sidewalks. So if there's no sidewalk within 300 feet of the subject property, then fee in lieu shall be paid. So all residential and non-residential construction, new development would have to either pay fee in lieu moving forward or construct sidewalk. And this is an effort to complete our pedestrian network and have more connectivity through town. Staff does recommend approval of the ordinance amendment, and Planning Board does. They also recommended approval of this ordinance amendment at their meeting in December. And the ordinance they saw had 250 lots, but again, that was changed to 300. Now we'll go back to the table so that you may visualize that. And please keep in mind, if there is something you would like to have the waiver language added back in, you can adopt various versions of this with just the language that you do or do not want included. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Cool. Questions for staff? Mr. Bunn?
Samantha, I'd like to see us do away with the variance and stick with the waivers on all this language. I don't know how y'all feel about that.
Mr. Grannis?
I would concur with Councilman Bunn on that. I'd like to see the waiver incorporated and the variance removed. Also, if I may, Mayor, I had a question pertaining to the lengths of driveways. I noticed that in this particular update, we do refer to widths of driveways, but we don't refer to lengths. And the concern that I have about that, unless I don't clearly understand the entire ordinance, is that oftentimes we are seeing driveways that are not long enough to be able to completely clear sidewalks, and as a result, vehicles oftentimes obstruct sidewalks, meaning that pedestrians have to go around generally on the street.
We did not amend anything under the driveway section. This language is existing, and I can tell you that all the planned developments that have gone through in the past 2 years, they do have to make sure that front setback for the garage and the driveway is at least 23 to 25 feet to suffice for either one large vehicle or two smaller compact. But that's definitely something we can look at with the UDC rewrite. But at this time, this ordinance before you tonight doesn't change anything dealing with driveways, but we have addressed that issue.
Okay.
You may have already stated this because I know I've heard it before, but just to refresh me in this moment and for the record, can you give us the difference between the variance instead of the waiver or the waiver instead of the variance?
Sure. So a variance is through the planning board or board of adjustments. Ours is one and the same. And a variance requires you to meet different findings of facts. You have to have evidence. It's an evidentiary hearing. And a waiver is a decision that the town council would make based on topography or other unique situations dealing with the property. And there is so basically what you would do with the ordinance tonight is all the language that is struck through, you would have that as part of the ordinance, then take out the variance language. It's already stated in there.
So the variance is granted by the planning board or the board of adjustment or whatever board is overseeing.
Yes.
And the reason that we use that type of structure in local government is to have input from individuals out in the public versus just council input.
Again, it is a variance evidentiary hearing, quasi-judicial, so other parties would have the ability to present evidence to the contrary of the applicants as well, yes.
But all stated through the board, not the council.
Yes, it will all be handled through the planning board, and the waiver is solely through council. And it is not evidentiary, but there is some standards that should be followed.
Gotcha. Well, then I would be in more favor of a variance because I think that could possibly open a can of worms with a variable and, I think that if we're going to have these boards and we ask them to review information for us, and in particular planning board, I'll just speak to that one specifically. If we're going to have these type of boards there to guide this council, then we need to be listening to their judgment. I know it doesn't mean we always have to, but I think that's a great value that brings for citizen input. Mr. Thompson.
I see it both ways, and I do, personally, I feel like this board is capable of handling any waiver that comes before us and making a good, sound decision. But to me, in the interest of the public good, I feel like that if someone has to provide substantial evidence to prove the case, that has more teeth to me. And you're not relying on just us having a gut feeling either way. I think if somebody had to present evidence, to me, that carries a little bit more weight. But like I said, I don't have much heartburn with it either way, but I think variance to me is in the being the better, good for the public.
And town staff, the planning department, we do have the variance language versus the waiver, and that is town's preference, the staff.
All right, this has been noted as a public hearing. I'll now open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak, please step forward and state your name for the record.
David DeYoung, River Wild, 114 West Main Street. Staff has done a really good job taking the considerations of the development community in mind on this. We really appreciate staff revising from 250 to 300, which is what other municipalities are doing right now. We still do believe that the waiver is the right way to go, at least in the short run. As you guys know, you are getting ready to embark on a complete code rewrite, and it's going to give you an opportunity to evaluate this in more detail. The charts that we provided, the metrics that we provided are, on other communities. You'd be the only community that doesn't allow a waiver and goes for the variance. It should also be noted that subdivisions greater than 5 lots already are major subdivisions and are required to come to town council. They actually skip planning board for their approval, and it's quasi-judicial, includes access and transportation as a part of the findings of fact. Requiring us to do a separate variance process, it would be disjointed. You'd have a variance at planning board and a subdivision approval at council, which would just require us to hire more consultants and show up at another meeting to do that when we do feel that this is something that council can handle at this point and has been handling, at least in the tenure that I've been in this municipality. The other note I'd like to make is I just want a clarification from staff that the 2 access points required at 30 units are external access points from the subdivision, just for a point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, no one else wishing to speak. I'll turn it over to council for their discussion. Mr. Holder.
I've had a couple of phone calls from seniors that didn't want to come tonight because of the threat of coronavirus, and they're concerned that we're going to vote on this tonight. I'd like to postpone it till the second meeting in April. I'll make that as a motion.
Okay, we have a motion to continue this. I was looking for my right legal word. Continue this item until the April first meeting in April. Yes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for a continuance. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, up next on the agenda is the public hearing 2020-10 RZ 2900 NC Highway 42 West rezoning.
This is the rezoning for the 2900 block of NC Highway 42 West. This is at the corner of Government Road and NC Highway 42. It is just over the bypass if you're coming from Clayton heading to 4042 area. The request is to rezone from RE to B3. Can't be my braces. And you can see the applicant is McAdams, and those are the owners. The proposed zoning is B3. Across the street, there is a property B3. There's also a church that is across the street, and it is zoned residential. But you could say that it's more of a commercial use. As we all know, this whole area is changing. According to the small area plan, the commercial entities will pretty much be along NC Highway 42. And that is also why the staff does feel that it's consistent with, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that is also consistent, and we do recommend approval of this rezoning from RE to B3. You can see the existing uses for an RE district, and you can see the potential uses. Not all those are permitted, but those are potential uses that could go there at that site. This is the view of the property. There's multiple different structures on the 3 different parcels. And it is near the intersection with a traffic signal. Again, it is consistent with our comprehensive plan 2040, and it is envisioned to be a community mixed use. And the applicant has addressed the approval criteria, and planning board did recommend approval of this rezoning. And staff also recommends approval. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions for staff? All right, this has been noted as a public hearing, so anyone interested in speaking, please step forward and state your name for the record. All right, no one wishing to speak. I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for discussion.
What's this property going to be used for?
Anything in the B3 zoning.
I know. But I mean, 42 is pretty tight now as you come down, especially in that area with traffic.
exact use for this site. I think the applicant may be here. They can probably speak to that. But right now, it is just a rezoning, open-ended rezoning, RE to B3. So any use under the B3 district would be permitted outright, or there's some that are conditional or special use.
Samantha, can you at least give some examples of what are some
Sure.
approved?
So existing would be pretty much any sort of residential use, manufactured home, just a double wide, residential, any sort of home. And a potential use could be a gas station, a restaurant, a medical, or excuse me, a general office. Pretty sure daycare is going to be conditional, but it could be a potential use. So anything along your retail type, could be a boutique, could be a hair salon, could be a number of different things.
Could it also be, I'm sorry, Mayor,
No, go ahead.
could it also be something of a medical nature? I noticed because you have nursing homes, so could it be like a medical facility or possibly doctor's offices, things of that nature?
Yes.
Any other questions? Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, after considering the recommendations of the planning board and the planning director, I move to approve case number 2020-10-RZ, 2900 Highway 42 West rezoning, and to approve the statement of consistency and reasonableness included in the agenda packet.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the rezoning request. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, up next, we're going to get some updates from our public information specialist.
Stacy Beard, Public Information Officer, Communications Director, whatever you want to call me. So the town's response to coronavirus, what is COVID-19, has been ever-changing because this whole situation is ever-changing, right? From hour to hour, we're learning something new. So sort of this theme of making a decision, but likely tomorrow maybe adjusting it and changing it is becoming probably the best suited response to something like this because we don't know from day to day. Of course, we had been hearing about cases overseas and staff had begun, as we spoke about at the last council meeting, doing some extra cleaning, wiping desks and counters that the public interacted with. We gave notice to any employees who would travel, what the health, guidelines were for returning back to work. But then on Thursday, all the department heads gathered together and listened to the governor's news conference, where the first real, wow, this is happening, guidelines came. And that's where he issued, guidelines that any events over 100 people, we're going to try to limit because that many people together means that many people in close quarters. And so at that time, staff began to think about, well, what does that mean for us? And we were tasked with coming up with a list of things that we would have to cancel or postpone. And in the immediate, we just thought about, okay, what's happening this weekend? And thankfully and unfortunately, some of the events self-regulated themselves. The News Charter School had the Matilda play, right, at the Clayton Center. All the kids were looking forward to that. They called it themselves. But other things we had to actually, initiate. Again, following the guidelines of the health department, we looked at some of our events and activities that had some of those high-risk populations. They identified through the governor's office anyone 65 and over, people with compromised immune systems. So we started thinking about our senior programming. Many of our advisory boards have people of all ages. And so the decision was made for the rest of the month, let's postpone any advisory board meetings. And I began to push out this information on a COVID-19 sort of landing page that stays and keeps being updated, claytonnc.org/virus. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the active shooter class that filled up within a day that the police department was offering at St. Anne Catholic Church because they didn't feel comfortable having that, and we didn't feel comfortable hosting what could have been some of those people from that compromised population. All our advisory boards were canceled, and that includes, we had a follow-up question, the DDA has subcommittees. They could probably wait on those until we get more guidance. The popular summer camp registration, which was supposed to be Saturday morning, and we probably would have tons of moms and dads signing up for that. We postponed that. We're hoping we don't postpone summer camp, but we postponed that. So in any case that we could, we said we're postponing in the hopes of rescheduling. Please have baseball. Scott's not here. We just spent a lot of money at a sporting goods store on Spencer's equipment, but we understand. And we obviously saw groups all around us, counties and organizations all around us sort of heeding the same thing. So we were in line with what everybody else was doing. High school sports were canceled. And then when the executive order came that these guidelines from the governor are now law, obviously, we got a little more thoughtful and serious. On Saturday, we decided to close the community center. On Sunday, we decided that we would close the library today. It was just the right thing to do. And of course, when we pushed out that information, if you had a class that you were supposed to go to at the community center, call us. We'll talk about a refund. If you've got books that are out and you can't bring them back, you don't want to get out of the house, we're going to waive fines. We're not going to charge you library fines. So. And again, everything in the hopes of rescheduling. So that, again, is changing as we get more guidance. There was some information from as high as the president today that maybe groups of 10 shouldn't be getting together. There may be an executive order that follows that, but we are constantly monitoring that. Just this afternoon, we had a conference call with the county health department because, as you know, we're not health officials, right? We are continually pointing people back to the state Department of Health and Human Services, but also the county. We have 14 cases in Wake County nearby. We have 2 positive cases in Johnston County. And Johnston County talked about a hotline that they just set up today. It'll only be manned 8 to 5, but they already got 30 calls today. It is something that I'll be sharing out. That conference call was at 4, and I'll get that out there so that people know there is a number that they can call if they have questions or concerns. We're now talking internally about what we can do staffing-wise. Everybody's now supposed to stay at home. Well, they're going to be flushing their toilets a lot. They're going to be doing lots of laundry. Do we have staff in our water and sewer departments to continue to monitor and make sure we can provide those, what will perhaps be an increase in services for people? Our police and fire department, right? We're all at home. Maybe we're cooking at home because we don't want to go out. Can we make sure that we have shifts of people and response in the fire department and the police department? And how are we managing those? So we're seeing internal talks with the department heads as to how to staff to accommodate that. We're talking about ease and convenience for those that want to do business with us online instead of coming to this building. Can you pay online? Can you get your permit emailed to you instead of having to come here to pick it up? And so in the coming days, we'll probably begin to enact some of those things to accommodate what may be an interest in the public not to come to a public building. So again, we're pushing some of this out, obviously on social media, on our website. We have direct emails with all our Parks and Rec. We've definitely taken questions from the community. Just had the organization that's behind the last Friday event, which is an organic event that brings tons of people out to our downtown. Hey, what should we do? Of course, we direct them to look at the health guidelines. And once they looked at those, they said, in the best interest of Clayton, we can't go forward with this event. They probably would have 50 people just at their night market in Horn Square. It's very popular. So, again, right now, we're saying through the end of the month, but it could be extended. It's just everyday monitoring. And so far, we've had, good response from the community. Haven't had, really any real outright concerns shared with us on on social media or via email or phone calls. So it's sort of a general overview of what's happened. But we keep directing people to the health department. We have this full list of events that I continue to update that are canceled. Of course, we're telling people how to get books online. Parks and Rec is thinking about doing some of their programming online. Maybe they do a fitness class online and we do a Facebook Live with one of the instructors so you can get some exercise at home. And of course, also directing people to this new hotline that the county has set up for health-related questions because they do have the health department for Johnston County, and they have nurses and their medical director, obviously, on staff to help answer questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you for the update. So up next, we're going to have the Neuse River Water Reclamation Facility update.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, J.D. Solomon, working as the program manager for the water reclamation facility. Following a little bit with what Ms. Beard said, clearly on our overall project schedule, we didn't anticipate a pandemic to happen in the middle of it. But with any good program, we did talk as a leadership team. We identified early 20 project level risk, and we'll talk about some of those in just a few minutes. But there's 7 forms of crisis, kind of the book on that. And one of those is a natural or physical disaster. And so this is equivalent to that. We would have thought about a hurricane probably first. But part of that risk management technique is on those rare events is to follow the normal town procedures and to the best of our ability to plow through that, because at the end of the pipe in 3 years from now, people are going to expect that plant to be done and we'll forget there's ever been a pandemic. So it is on our risk register. It's one of the things we track, but again, right now, it's not affected the project, and we're going to do all we can to prevent that from happening. So 2 things on my list, and I will give you that's bothering me a little bit. 2 things, kind of freaking me out, actually, but 2 things I will give you of most concern, and I'd like to start there. Well, first of all, this will be at least a quarterly update I'll provide to council with the team. I have a nice PowerPoint, but I went through the formalities of all that just to kind of give you the facts on this night. But I'll try to do this quarterly or when we have a big update. 2 things of most concern that I would be, and they've been identified since the beginning of the project, but one is short-term financing. And right now we are before the Local Government Commission. I think I briefed you guys on that in February. We did go to their doors, we did hunt them down, we did talk to them, we have pushed on them a lot. And all that to say is we have to give them a plan for their board meeting in April. We have to give it to them on Wednesday. What it's meant is we have had a lot of reluctance from Local Government Commission to loan us the money up front to do this, because they always fear, well, what if the project doesn't happen? We have told them that we're replacing an existing plant. We have told them that our residential growth is not going away. We have told them our industrial clients aren't going away, but still yet they're hesitant. What it's required us to do, especially some updates we've done in the past week, is to basically cut our plan down to about a $120 million plan, which takes us to a viable option from the business cases of about 4 million gallons, and we'll try to get 5 out of that. But we've had to come back. What our strategy is to give them a plan basically that they can't say no to, because we need them to approve it. We need it desperately, and we would like their commission to do that in April. So that's kind of where we're at with the Local Government Commission. Tied into that, but somewhat independent, are the nutrient credits. And Rich Capola's done a great job with that, but one of the things on the list was we had to secure our nutrients in the Neuse River Basin. We have gotten some pushback from DEQ. I think we've briefed you on that a little bit in February. They are still pushing back. But we think they maybe have given us a little bit of positive hope with the deal we've tried to work out. And in addition to the first deal, if they don't rule in our favor, we have found potentially another source that would provide us the balance of the credits. But as you guys know from past experience, this is millions of dollars at stake with how these rules are interpreted. And so we're going to fight the best we can to get the best interpretation we can. The great thing about nutrient credits is their value doesn't go down. It's like buying property. It'll be something you guys will have. So as part of that upfront cost, that's something that won't go away in any circumstance. So those are our 2 areas of concern. Some things that have gone well, really well, $30 million grant, low interest loan, not a grant, from the Clean Water Management Trust Fund that was awarded in February. We knew about an economic development grant, but we were able to revise that and submit for about $8.5 million, which, again, we'll have to front the cost, but that's potentially a grant there coming. We've made the first cut. We'll know more by May sometime if we've made the second cut. Our soil borings are done on schedule, and we have no rock or groundwater in our construction anticipated zone, so that could have significantly caused both cost and time delays. But so we're not dealing with rock or water, as far as we know from our 18 soil borings. All of our environmental site assessment work right now is initially just the initial assessment. This is not the environmental assessment, the EA, but the preliminaries. And based on the preliminary layout we've done of the site, we believe, and we've told the state this, we can miss all significant environmental concerns. And so that should make the project go well. So that's in our favor. The firing range, there's a little bit of bad news in this one, but it's mostly good. We've got the state out. We've got a sampling plan approved for that. And Withers Ravenel will start sampling next week to get the lead out sometime this summer, if you like that pun, okay? So again, we're right on schedule with that. And you guys have approved part of that money back in February so that we can go ahead and get the soil off the site. And so we hope that'll be progressing, so that's good news. I said it was mixed because we've been working with the manager and the police chief to work through that firing range. It is a bit of an inconvenience, and the police department's been great in working with the team. But I think some of you may or may not know, the manager may have some things in the budget or inconvenience time that may have to be considered as we displace the police department from the firing range. But overall, that's going very well as well. We met last week, 2 more things here, scoping meeting with DEQ, and that's to get the environmental assessment done. That is critical path because that has to be completed and signed off on in order to activate that money from the low interest loan. And so that's a big milestone in that. So that was had last week, and we had great conversation, and we learned a few things, and they learned a few things from us, so that is completely on track as well. Finally, Stacy and I have worked some together, but we do have information on the website, and information from this briefing and other frequently asked questions will be on the site. We have some up now. We'll have a standard presentation that I've already drafted that I need to get with Stacy to finish, but that'll be available if you guys are asked to do some external presentations, 10 or 15 slides on what we're up to. Again, it's a significant project. It's the biggest we've ever done. And so we want to make sure both staff and the board, the council has all the information they need if asked to give a presentation. So with that, tried to be brief. Questions from any of y'all?
JD, could you speak a little more to the nutrient credits and why DEQ is pushing back?
Yeah, basically, the point-to-point credits are really not, it's a free market system. It's a credit trading system. So between the wastewater dischargers, there's really no credits out there. Now, Mr. Coppola maybe has found us a few, but not enough to do the job. So we've had to make an offer, and you guys approved it, I think, at the last meeting, to go from a point to a non-point. So basically, we're going to take some active land that's been disturbed right up against the water down near the coast and permanently put it in easement and let it go back natural. And then they will give you credit for that up here. If they went by this formula they use for the point-to-point, that's a new concept to go down the river. There's been a law passed this summer. And so what they want to say is if you're using it down at the river, it's a different formula. They won't give you full credit as if you were buying it from a wastewater dischargers down there. It's the same biological processes that work on nutrients from here down to the Neuse River, to the estuary, to the Sound. But the state's saying there's a shade of gray, and they don't have to interpret it one way. And so we're in that, and it is a shade of gray. So we're hoping that that ruling will be favorable to us, that they'll do the way they've done for 20 years. But technically, they may rule that we don't get credit but for half of what that's valued at. So it's a long answer, and it is kind of complicated by a formula, but we are working through the technical parts of that.
And that differs completely from nitrogen credits, correct?
It differs, they're nitrogen credits, but they're ones we buy from non-point sources like buffers versus point sources, which would be like a one-to-one trade for those. So I probably botched that up, but there's an equation and there's a lot of interpretation that goes on in those equations. And this is a relatively new thing for the state.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, JD.
Thank you.
The next item under old business is the Neuse River Water Reclamation Facility financing.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we're going to review the bids and make a recommendation of acceptance to issue water sewer revenue bonds up to $15 million. In your package, you can see Davenport has an RFP compilation summary that they compiled. They distributed this RFP out to over 50 financial institutions. The town received 5 bids. We got bids back from Capital One, Chase Bank, First National Bank, Pinnacle Public Finance, and Truist. Staff is, in conjunction with Davenport, our financial advisor, is making a recommendation that council accept the bid from Chase for 25 years at 2.88% interest. That provides the lowest debt service payment as well as the least impact on ratepayers. Over the 5-year projection in our rate model, that results in approximately $558,000 of debt service.
That's very good. Questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to authorize. Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize staff to proceed with the recommendation for the Neuse River Water Reclamation Facility Financing RFP, or RRP.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next under budget amendments is the design contract, recreational facilities.
Okay, the budget amendment, we're asking council to approve the transfer of our recreation fee in lieu revenues that we've accumulated over the years. Approximately $700,000 we're going to transfer to cover 2 30% design contracts that are related to enhancements and construction at the town's recreational facilities. We more than likely will wind up reimbursing ourselves for these costs when we do our GL bond sale. But right now, we have to fund these 30% design contracts.
All right, questions or comments for staff regarding the budget amendment? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Grannis.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the design services contract for design of renovations and additions to Municipal Park, Municipal Civitan Park, Clayton Community Park, and East Clayton Community Park in Clayton.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Robert. Up next is staff reports, beginning with the town manager.
Report.
Town attorney.
No report.
Town clerk. All right, we're going to turn it over to council for comments. Mr. Thompson.
I just want to, while we have an opportunity to thank the staff, specifically the department heads who have been working pretty much nonstop since all of this virus has really flared up. And, you know, everybody from public information to our public safety partners to this has affected every department in the town. And these department heads and their employees are just, there's a lot of their way of doing business that's really turned upside down lately. And just know that the council thanks you, supports you, and appreciates what you're doing to promote unity within our town government and let our community know what they need to do.
Agreed. I don't know if it's appropriate or if we have enough time to hear from HR just a little bit of what's going on with HR and employees and this virus. Because I know you ain't scared to be put on the spot, so.
Good evening, Delisha Barnes, HR Director for the Town of Clayton. So I will echo many of the things that our PIO talked about in terms of preparation. The situation is continuing to evolve, and so are our practices and policies as it applies to our employees. So as of right now, part of our prevention efforts in terms of risk mitigation that apply to protecting the public, like closing the recreation facility as well as the library, also protects those employees who are working in those environments. We're currently in process right now as a department head team of reviewing all of our options, including what can we do to follow some recommendations around teleworking, looking at time off policies and how we're going to manage to both maintain this critical services that we provide to the community as well as protect our employees. So it is evolving. I did send out communication to staff letting them know that the HR office is going to be the primary contact for information as it relates to personnel matters. Stacy Beard and the PIO will continue to be the face and voice for information impacting the public. We are leveraging resources like the School of Government and the League to follow best practices and guidelines. A lot of that we believe will continue to evolve this week with some webinars that are on tap. So more information related to adjustments that we're making impacting employees will come later this week.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the update. All right, any other comments from council? Mr. Grannis?
I'd just like to echo Mayor Pro Tem Thompson's comments. I think in times like this, for me, it's amazing to see how people come together to arrive at the best conclusion for everyone involved. And I do believe up to this point, the staff has far exceeded, I think, any of our expectations. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm sure that our citizens who are aware of the jobs that you have done to get us to this point are also very grateful for that. And probably the most ironic thing I think for me specifically is I don't know that any of us have ever encountered anything of this significance, and at the same time know so little about it and what it can do to each and every one of us. But I do commend the entire staff. Also, all of our emergency and first responders. You guys, you all make a huge difference, and I don't want that to go unnoticed. So thank you very much.
All right, anyone else? If not, I'll open the floor for informal discussion and public comment. Anyone wish to speak? All right, no one wishing to speak. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.